Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. The Designing Hollywood podcast is dedicated to all things movies, the movie industry, and its talented professionals. Today's episode is sponsored by the Western Costume Company. Today's guest is Paul TAZEWELL. Our guest today has been designing costumes for Broadway, regional theater, film and television, dance, and opera productions for close to 30 years. He began his Broadway career with the groundbreaking musical Bring in the Noise, Bring in the Funk, directed by George C. Wolfe. Most recently, he is known for his work with both Lin Manuel Miranda's Tony Award-winning original Broadway productions of Hamilton and In the Heights, which is beyond cool. In the United States and across the globe, he has designed for such renowned companies as the Metropolitan Opera, the Bolshoi Ballet, the English National Opera, just to name a few. His feature film credits include Harriet for Focus Features, Hamilton for Disney Plus, and Westside Story, directed by Steven Spielberg. In 2016, he received an Emmy Award for NBC's The Wiz Live, as well as a Tony Award for Hamilton. Other notable honors include 2 Lucille Lortel Awards, 4 Helen Hayes Awards, a Princess Grace Foundation Fellowship, and the Princess Grace Statue Award. He holds an MFA from New York University and a BFA from North Carolina School of the Arts. He has been privileged instructing students as a guest artist for both New York University and the North Carolina School of the Arts. From 2003 to 2006, he held a faculty position at Carnegie Mellon University. It is my great honor to introduce Mr. Paul TAZEWELL. Paul, I have to say, I don't think I'm very worthy to be sitting with you. Your educational background and the fundamentals that you have seem to be just extraordinary, beyond reproach. And I wanted to ask you, I've interviewed a lot of costume designers on the show, and a lot of them have the same very rigorous educational background where they've studied the fundamentals, they've apprenticed, they've really worked hard to understand the very basic building blocks of the profession. Would you say that's true?
That is absolutely true. I started, early on. I mean, I was, I guess, bitten by the theater bug when I was in grade school. I mean, maybe junior high. I was serious about it. And it was from seeing a musical that my neighborhood high school was doing, a production of Music Man. And I fell in love with theater and entered into a performing arts program. I mean, when I was coming up, that was when fame was, coming out. That was that was that period of time.
Was that the original film, Alan Parker's film, or was it the series?
It was the original film. It was the original film.
That movie blew me away as well. It's still an influence on me. The 4 years, I Hot Lunch Jam, still one of my favorite songs in any movie.
So funny. I was just saying that the other day, making my bed.
Shake it, Sadie. Yes, serving lady.
Sadie. Anyway. So that was, in Akron, Ohio, my class wanted to be, what we were seeing on film.
Sure.
Wanted to be that school. And it was a performing arts program in and amongst other focuses. You could take law or you could take broadcast communications. Well, mine was performing arts. And I had the opportunity to both be in productions, to study dance, to study voice, to study acting, half of the day, and then the rest was academic. And then when I was a junior in high school, I had the opportunity to design the costumes for our production of The Wiz. So it was kind of a full circle to then receive the Emmy for The Wiz Live on NBC. In that same production, the one in high school, I played The Wiz as well. So it's going from that and then figuring out, okay, what are you going to focus on? My parents were, my mother is an educator, and her parents were educators. My dad was a research chemist for Firestone. So it was pretty important for me to get an education. And my hope and dream was to make it to New York, become a Broadway performer, and do the best I could. potentially become the next Ben Vereen. But I entered into a fashion program at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, thinking that on the side, I'll take classes in performance and I will start to audition and go towards what my passion is. After that year, it was culture shock, and I made the decision to transfer to North Carolina School of the Arts, and I focused on costume design. And from that point, really let go of my desire to be a performer, and really held on to. And I think that it was, it was my thought that I would be typecast if I was a performer, if I was an actor. And at that time, that could have been true. I think that things have changed greatly now, but where I wanted to be a leading man type, a romantic lead, those weren't the parts that were being given to.
Was that a difficult decision, a difficult realization to come to?
It was, well, because my dream had always been to be a performer. When I was in school, what I realized is that I could live vicariously through many different characters. There was a limitation with design, I could be completely expansive. And it also leaned into, all of those other interests that I have. I grew up working with my hands a lot, and creating and sewing and drawing and painting. And those were ways that I was expressing, that I had learned to express, inspired by my mom and my grandmother. And, so it put into play everything that I was about. And, you're talking about, the education and how important it is to be diversified in a way as a designer. That is because we are always exploring different characters. We're always exploring different cultures. It allows you to investigate. And, I completely embrace, I love researching and researching why people are the way that they are. I spend hours sitting in the mall, those when, kind of the malls were really popular. In the winter, there wasn't a whole lot to do that wasn't cold, but sitting in the mall and just watching people walk by and trying to create stories, or, imagining stories of these people that I didn't know, but why they, I think that what was going on in my head was, why were they dressing the way that they dress? What is their internal story? So that kind of insight I apply to what I do now. I mean, I've carried all of that with me. My interest in dance and my ability to understand movement and bodies in space, and it directly relates to how I see fabric and clothing moving on a person's body and become an extension of a person's body. So it's. I just think that it is why what a designer needs to desire to know a lot about many things, because we're inevitably going to be asked to at least find out what the real thing is. What does it really need and want to be when you're trying to depict a certain storyline or a certain culture. Yeah.
Well, what I found really interesting about theater is over the last 30 years, I remember seeing the Julie Taymor designed production of Lion King, thinking this is really extraordinary, and it broke free of the traditional boundaries of what we normally thought as theater, all the way up to what you've done with Lin Manuel Miranda, with Hamilton, and there's been, I think, a vibrancy and a modernization of how theater and musicals are thought of as, the general public. Even things like Book of Mormon have brought in youthful audiences around the world, and a lot of the time I think that Broadway was thought of as, well, it's Broadway and it's a niche appeal, but I think that's changed I think that it's really brought brand new audiences in, and you've sort of been one of your first bring to noise, bring to funk was maybe, I don't know if it was the beginning of that, but it was part of that. And how did you feel about being right in the middle of this sort of changing and broadening of the appeal of musical theater and theater in general to audiences?
I've been hugely fortunate to be a part of productions, many productions that have really been groundbreaking and have set a new tone for theater specifically. You bring up bringing the noise, bringing the funk. In the middle of it, I had no idea what we were. I knew what we were doing. We were creating a piece of live theater, but I didn't know how how forward thinking it was. It was coming out. It came out the same season as Rent. So Rent and Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk were running neck and neck. As far as the most provocative, the most interesting Broadway productions happening at that time.
And they really were. I think people don't remember just how groundbreaking those two productions were.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that it was coming out of a different point of view. What had come before that was the world of Dream Girl, well, Chorus Line, and then Dream Girls. I think Barnum was out. Bob Fosse was doing a lot of things, but there was a different tone to what a Broadway show was. And I think that Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk was dipping into. I mean, they even had a lead character that was the poet, and so it was about. It was the poetic message. How do you realize and make live the poetic voice and the vocal voice as poetry, and then dance as poetry. And how do you talk about that? And then, underneath all of that and infused through all of that was the story of Black Americans and how they, made their way through this American culture and what they brought to American culture. So, being able to explore that in a very smart way with George C. Wolfe was, it was life-changing, and to have that be my first Broadway show was incredible. It was absolutely incredible.
What did your parents think? Were they here to see that rise that you had? And I mean, coming from academia and things like that, they must have been enormously proud of those accomplishments.
Beside themselves. I mean, they were so very proud. I mean, you can imagine my dad was like, because he didn't think that I was going to be able to make a living doing
Right, he's a chemist.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I was hell bent on doing something that was creative. Whether it was going to be fashion designer or if it was going to be, being an actor, I knew that I had to do that because I would not succeed if I had been asked to be a chemist. And so I think that they were, so very proud that I was making my mark as a designer.
Well, that's a testament to they had to have supported you. They had to have encouraged that. Well, I love to see all of the different things that you've done. It's funny, The Wiz, I saw the movie. I've never seen the actual stage production, but I saw the movie. I loved the movie. It was, I wanted to ease on down that road, when it was, I saw it at the Coliseum Theater, which is another theater in Seattle, in downtown Seattle, that's not there anymore. But again, I did see the production that you did, the live production, and I loved it. It wasn't, it was different than being in a theater, but still, there was it was delightful. It was beautiful. It was cool. And I'm curious. I mean, you've worked on a lot of, there's been a lot of plays and musicals that have been translated to film and back again, which is sort of, The Wiz was a play, then it was a movie, then it was a live broadcast. How do you approach something when you've worked on things, and this will play into talking about West Side Story later, when you've worked on something that has previously existed in other incarnations, how do you bring something that's uniquely you to a production?
that's always a big question for me, when I'm faced with recreating, re-envisioning a story that's already been told. And I eventually, I set aside, I acknowledge what came before, and it affects me, however it does. Usually, like, let's say with The Color Purple, or let's say The Wiz, as I too love the film. I
Yeah.
grew up with the film and loved the film. I was in a production of it. You have to, at a certain point, as a designer, set that aside, acknowledge the place that it lives for other people, for an audience, and then go about creating a similar energy, or just embracing the intent of the original production, but bring it through your own, see it through your own lens, or I see it through my own lens. And it's always informed by my collaboration with the director, my collaboration with the other designers that are part of the creative team. We're always coming, and we come to the table literally with so much other experience as well, individually, and other than what the original production was. So we can't help but make it be something different and new. And I think that is part of the challenge, but also part of the fun. Part of the exciting journey in recreating what it might be. I mean, I was listening to another podcast. A director was speaking about a different film, and saying that he went to the original novel as opposed to leaning into the first film that had been done of that same story. And I think that was definitely what Steven's intent was. He was really embracing the original Broadway production that was done in 1957, and less so the production, the film that was done in 1961.
Well, you've worked on, I just look at the things that you've done. I mean, Hamilton really, well, both In the Heights and Hamilton were so groundbreaking in terms of, especially speaking to where America is in terms of things like race relations. And it really smashed through boundaries in a really interesting, very exciting, and yet very entertaining way. When you were you pitched the idea of Hamilton, and because whenever, and I've watched it on Disney Plus so many times because it's beautiful, and I just wonder, what was that like when you first heard that whole idea? Did Lin Manuel Miranda come to you, or did you think he was nuts, or what?
Well, I definitely knew that he wasn't nuts. I mean, I had done In the Heights with Lin,
Sure,
and with Thomas Kail, the director, and it was one of those experiences that designers live for. That the warmth of that team and how we created together. So I was all in before they even asked. I mean, I was so excited to be asked. But then I received the script, and it was Tommy Kail, who handed me the script and said, "Take a look at this. I'd like for you to work on this." And he said, "It's about Alexander Hamilton." And I was like, "Alexander Hamilton?" I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, yeah, okay." And trying to make sense of, and he said, Lin has written this really, beautiful piece, and we're looking to do it X. And when I was reading it, and you read the words on the page, and I was trying to put together, because it's all sung, it's all, the evening is all sung, the production is all sung. So my relationship to the words was completely different once I then heard the music. There was some samples, or some demo tapes of some of the music that had been done, and so I listened to some of that. I was like, "Oh, okay, I get it," and I now understand that it is a contemporary telling. The music is contemporary. It has that kind of hip hop feel,
Mm-hmm.
which was similar to In the Heights. So that put me in a certain mode. But then when I saw it as a reading, it was with actors, and they were all at music stands, but just sitting, and to experience that and completely sung through, it blew me away. And I just fell in love with the piece itself, and from then that point on, uh, felt like I can do anything, but what I cannot do is mess this up. I cannot get in the way of the beauty that this piece is.
So
Uh,
I'm curious. You I can't imagine reading. First of all, okay, Alexander Hamilton, as you explained. Then you read it, and then when you first saw it and realized what kind that where the music was, and knowing it was maybe probably different than you first thought. I just that spark of, I mean, I know kind of what that's like when something hits you and you realize what you've got. Like, this is lightning in a bottle. This is something unique. This is something new. So once you have that, I wouldn't say it's divine inspiration because it came from Lin Manuel Miranda, the actors, and your director. But once that inspiration hits you, how do you then begin? What's the process like? What you're like now? You have your mandate. You've got your marching orders. Where do you start?
you get that, or I do. I get this little. It's both a tingle and a pit in my stomach happening at the same time, and I start to have conversations with the director. With in this case it was Thomas Kail, and I said, what is the intent of how you want to tell the story? What's important for you? And you start to talk around. You're not talking specifically about the story, but about what does it hold? How do we want for an audience to feel? What is the most compelling way? And this is what that this was always what drove the conversation, is what is the most compelling way of telling this story. And for me, I'm because I know, I've seen portraits of Alexander Hamilton. I lived in Washington D.C. I know, I know the forefathers, frontwards and backwards. That's what we were taught as far as how the nation was created. And what I didn't know is, do we want for this to be a contemporary looking production, meaning in contemporary clothing? Are we going to, translate it into a modern dress story? Or are we going to embrace the 18th century? And then, whatever grayscale that might be in between. And because I had already done In the Heights with all of them, we were in the world of jeans and T-shirts and sneakers, and Andy Blankenbuehler, who's the choreographer, was the choreographer on Hamilton as well. And so I knew that language, and I understood that Andy now wanted to create a language that was specific to Hamilton. And how that affects me is, what are they going to wear on their feet? How are they going to move? How do we want for them to move through space? And so I was, about putting together loads and loads and loads of research. I mean, I was, image after image after image that was both 18th century clothing, uniforms of, of the American Revolution, and all of the portraiture that, was of our forefathers. And then alongside of that is all of the fashion that has been inspired by the 18th century. And how it might be, shifted and translated, into telling this story. And then, digging through all of that with all of us at the table, all the designers and director at the table, we made the decision, because there was an upcoming staged reading, we made the decision that we would dress all of the performers, all the actors, in actual clothing. And fortunately, we were doing it with the Public Theater in New York. And so I had access to a big stock of costumes that I could pull.
Mm.
And it could just be, kind of a tryout, a template for, what might come. And it gave us an opportunity to see what it would be to mash up the music and the words with the 18th century and that silhouette. And then from that point on, we embraced that as our idea after that stage reading, and then continued to perfect, with the production at the Public and then going on to Broadway. And
How long was that process?
it was pretty quick. I mean, it was, we were working through the summer with the staged reading. And then I think that we launched into the Public's production it was late fall. And, we opened late fall, early winter, and then we had a run at the Public. It took off. It became huge while I was at the Public. And then they made the decision that they were going to move it to Broadway. And so that gave me an opportunity to, again, rethink and perfect what our idea was. And there are many ideas that just became stronger. Some of the color palette became stronger because we really knew visually what we had and what would operate in the smartest way.
When you moved to Broadway, did you go and redesign new costumes from scratch?
I did. Well, I mean, all of the clothes were rebuilt because it was at the Public Theater. I mean, it's an off-Broadway house,
right?
So, we the theater, and as a designer, we do our best with the budget that we're given to create a world that is as perfect as we can, under that roof. And then moving to Broadway, that you're going to have 8 performances a week. So clothes need to be built in a way that it will sustain that.
Mm.
And then also, you have the ability to go to builders, tailors, and dressmakers, and boots and shoemakers that they're just they know what they do. They know their craft well enough, and therefore it is more costly. But I think that it all paid off in the end. But yeah, indeed, I would say that probably the biggest change might be Jefferson, because we actually changed the color. It went from being a brown velvet suit, which was inspired by Jefferson's his portraits of the real Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, to acknowledging Daveed Diggs and what Daveed brought to that character of Thomas Jefferson, and how he was playing it, and how it fit into the story as we were telling it within Hamilton.
I'm curious, they talk about how actors, theater acting, when you act, you have to be bigger than you do in, say, film acting, because you have to fill up a theater. You have to, even the seats in the back have to be able to hear the actors project. But with film, everything gets smaller. When you're designing costumes for theater, are there, I guess, call them tricks of the trade that you can use in terms of various fabrics and colors that would be different for theater as opposed to, say, film, because of the way that theater lights hit? I don't know that this might be a little weird question, but I'm just curious because I've never thought of that before until just now.
I mean, I think that it's a great question. So much of it is about scale. It's not necessarily, for me as a designer, it's not necessarily about fabric, unless it has to do with pattern and scale and decoration and, like with the voice, or your things on screen are going to become much larger when you're seeing them up close. But you also see detail in a really wonderful way. I mean, it can be very intimate.
Mm.
And thankfully, or fortunately, as a designer, detail is very important for me. Really paying attention to how things are finished, or dressmaking, specific kinds of dressmaking and tailoring. I mean, all of that is very important for me. And when I'm designing for stage, I'm oftentimes looking to recreate what would be the actual garment, like if the actual period garment. If let's say it's a turn of the century costume, or 1950s costume. So I'm looking to the actual garment and stylistically around that garment to make decisions about how I want to trim, how all the details. Um, things, say if you're designing for the Met, because it's a larger house and you want for you want for the costume to project to the back, to be able to be seen to the back of the house in some form. Silhouette, strong silhouette, and then the scale of detail does become a little bit larger so that it will play to the house, let's say. But for me, character the character development is what it is. I mean, it's important for the character to be believable, whether it is on screen or it's on stage.
Mm.
And it's how I might design a musical is going to be different than how I would design a stage play if it's on stage, as well as if it's on film. So it's just applying what my sensibility is to in any of the tasks I'm designing that I'm given. Really.
Yeah, it was just something I was curious about, because again, looking at the how theater, musical theater, just theater in general has progressed over the last 30 years. There's been a lot of really, I mean, back to Julie Taymor, audacious choices, but then I would think, like in the Heights, you have to create, there's that believability, but also your dancers and performers have to be able to move,
Yeah.
and things like that. Now, you got a Tony Award nomination for working on The Color Purple, which was obviously a translation of Steven Spielberg's film. Another film that I adore, Quincy Jones's score is one of my favorites. Miss Seeley's Blues, another great song that I can never stop singing. Did you get a chance when you came on board that project? Was that something Spielberg himself was producing, and had you met him before?
No. Oprah Winfrey was one of our producers. She was brought on as a producer after the fact, though. I mean, it was already going to Broadway, and then and Oprah Winfrey was brought on. I didn't meet Steven until he asked me to design West Side Story. And
Wow.
it was because of, I think that I became visible with Hamilton, and therefore, someone turned him on to me, or he had seen Hamilton and thought that I might be somebody to investigate.
Wow. Now, did he? I mean, he must have known you did Color Purple. Like on your first meeting, did you talk about it?
I'm trying to think. On our first meeting, we barely had a meeting because I was out of the country, and the Skype went down. So we scheduled to have a second meeting, and that was great. And I don't remember talking about The Color Purple because it's I think that we were talking more about Hamilton,
Right.
and then launched into West Side Story.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. Steven Spielberg's been such a fixture in my own life, because I think all of our lives, because of just the kind of movies he's made. He's worked with so many different genres and so many different things, and it's funny to me, when I saw Lincoln, I didn't see it in the theater, and I had bought the Blu-ray, and I don't know why I just didn't watch it, and it sat there, and I finally watched it, and I was blown away by Lincoln. And I don't know why I was surprised by this, being a lifelong Steven Spielberg fan, but I watched Lincoln 4 times in that week. I was just blown away by the whole thing. And I think going back to like 1941 and the opening of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, it's always been in the back of my mind, like, why hasn't Steven Spielberg directed a musical? You know, I mean, clearly there's a dance sequence in 1941, but then the opening, the Anything Goes number from the beginning of Temple of Doom, you look at, I mean, there's Busby Berkeley influence in there and just the camera work in there. Did you ever have a conversation with him when he first talked to you about, did he have a lifelong desire to make a musical?
He did, specific to West Side Story.
Oh.
I think that he had wanted to do, I'm pretty sure that it was just specific to West Side Story. Although he had, like, as you were saying, he had done those other sequences in previous films. This experience for him was brand new. I think that, he worked very, very hard to understand the genre and to make sense of how he wanted to tell the story, definitely. But I know that West Side Story, he was given the album when he was a child and listened to it and fell in love with it and sang the songs, and I think that it was always in his in his soul. As for me, from junior high.
What was he like to collaborate with? How did the two of you begin? First of all, were you intimidated because it was Steven Spielberg?
This isn't the first time that I've been asked, and again, it's like working with celebrities. If I'm dressing them, I can't do my job if it's overwhelming to be in the same room with them. I need to connect with them on a level that is very intimate. It's really getting into how they will create a character and how to pull out their best attributes and to disguise others and to bring focus to how they want to take on this this character. So I had to set aside, when I was asked to have the meeting, I was like, oh my God, and then hey, I can do this. So great, it's Steven Spielberg. I honor that, but I'm going to enter into this as a professional and do my job.
Sure.
And it was he was so warm and engaging and inquisitive and really delightful to work with. I mean, from beginning to end. Really.
I love hearing that. Now, one of the things about West Side Story in the film and in the show is the opening number. The opening number really sets the stage. It introduces the two factions, and the opening of this film, that familiar, the whistling, and then you move into it, and then I adored how this movie opened. Because I was wondering, in the original film, it opens with that long, you see it starts out as a graphic, and then it becomes the New York skyline, and then there's those great like panning shots over the atmosphere, over the whole city, in a way that you really hadn't seen New York before at the time. I mean, I'm sure in 61 when the film came out, people were like, wow, look at that, but the fact that it was the future home of Lincoln Center, and it almost looked like a bombed out, war torn area, and you did such a wonderful job of drawing the line between the two factions in your clothing, in the costuming, and I was really curious when I was seeing the movie. I'm like, I wonder how they're going to do this. Like, how's this movie going to open? And I'm curious, that couldn't have been an easy task for you, because you have the period, and yet you have to create things that the dancers can perform in. But it wasn't just the various factions. You had to design neighborhoods. of people.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
and I'm curious, man, like when you did he say like, look, this has got to be a big this has got to be a bang. Like, how did you talked about before, like your research, where'd you begin?
I went directly to, the original sources, which were, they're photographs of 1950s New York, and there are, there's a lot that's out there to draw from. Some of the most inspirational were some of the color photographs of Gordon Parks. Just seeing what the streets really were. I mean, there are a lot of black and white photographs,
Mm-hmm.
definitely, and you can get a sense of shapes, of silhouettes, of different types of people. But when you start to see how color was pulled together, it becomes reality, because that's what we see. That's how we see our lives walking down the streets of New York, even going outside. So I wanted to get a really strong sense of what that was for the mid 1950s. What did New York feel like? And for Steven, it was very important to imbue it with that kind of reality, that sense of naturalism, if you will. You're talking about that opening sequence. With both Steven and also Tony Kushner, it was brilliant the way that they centered the story in, the environment is this, it's a disaster area. I mean, it's, all of these buildings are being brought down.
It's
So
being
that they can,
swept away. That was something different from the original film. You really get a sense that these people are being displaced. The old
right.
ways are literally, you're physically watching the manifestation of that, the ending of that era.
That's correct. And it becomes its own character in a way, because then you realize that it's futile for both gangs. Nobody's going to get this territory in the end. It's going to go to the city, and it's going to go to gentrification, and which is very timely. It's a very timely story to be telling. But I feel like my contribution, my work, was in staying in step with what that story was that they were hoping to tell. That we've got a gang that is surrounded by rubble. The first gang, that you encounter the Jets at the very beginning, and their environment is all of this rubble. It's dust covered, gravel and deconstructed buildings, I needed to align the clothing to that. If that's their playground, then their clothing is going to be affected by that. What does that look like? And so it's really honing in to how to tell that story with the gangs. How I told it with the Jets, and then also with the Sharks. Seeing the Sharks, the Latinx community coming in from migrating from Puerto Rico, and other Latin territories, Latin islands, and seeing them as aspirational, seeing them as a community that's hoping for better. And when you are hoping for better, how do what is your own self-respect? How do you dress yourself? The decision was made by Steven that all of the Shark men would have jobs. They have jobs to sustain themselves. That was what they were doing during the day, and then on their off time they were connected to the gang. So I think that set up already a great conflict, with these two communities, because they're coming from two different places, and what their desire is in the city is, it's coming from two different places, and that's what's dynamic.
Now, I'm curious, Janusz Kaminsky, Spielberg's DP that he'd been working with since the early 90s. I think I don't know if it was Saving Private Ryan, or it might have been Schindler's List, I think was the first thing that they did together. Now, he has a very specific way of lighting things. It's sort of this muted, it's really unique. Now, I'm curious, with all the vibrancy of your costumes and the color that you brought, did you have to collaborate with him in such a way because it would change the way he would light scenes, and with the amount of color you brought in, did you guys have a working relationship at all where you were collaborating too?
I mean, I was always laying out what I was going, what a scene was going to be color-wise, because color for me was very important. I had set up rules for telling the stories of the story of the clothing. Keeping the jets in cool tones, keeping the sharks in warm tones, reflective of where they were coming from, reflective of that more tropical world and sensibility, and then having the background mainly in the streets of New York be more of a gray tone or a neutral, so that these other two conflicting color groups could would be seen basically. So that was evident pretty early on as I was presenting what I was doing. And Steven embraced that, and Janusz as well. I do remember being on set at one point, and Janusz was working to light a specific scene, and color came up in our conversation. But he then impressed on me that as the cinematographer, your color may become, or my color may become anything. The color that I'm using, he has control of what that's going to be. See, when you actually see the film, to sit in the theater and watch it, because even in the dailies, you didn't get the full sense of what he was getting ready to do, but some of the filters that he used, and just his brilliant technique, how he lifted up the texture, and all of the breakdown and the wear and tear of all the clothes, and how we were setting all that up was just so beautifully done. And then you go to this scene like America that is explosive and hugely colorful and full of joy. And even within the same film, how that is embraced and just made so amazing. It's really
it was a really, America was a tour de force. The camera work, the color that your costumes brought, the movement. I mean, also obviously you've worked on Broadway, so you understand how fabrics move. But man, there are certain scenes like in the streets where it was like, man, you must have, it's almost like the fabric itself could fly on its own as people were spinning through the streets. I mean, I remember just being, it was almost like watching an action scene that he directed in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it was a musical with the camera moves, but then the camera would counter to the way that the dancers are moving. And it was just, it was spectacular. And I remember thinking to myself, this is what I've wanted Steven Spielberg to do for 45 years or whatever. I mean, it was spectacular.
Yeah.
And when
an action film. Yeah.
it was incredible. And it was so, like you said, it was just a joyous explosion of, you don't even realize how wide your smile is while you're watching that sequence.
Right.
Now I'm curious, in something like that, do you have to do like movement tests? Did you ever do camera tests with fabrics? So for scenes like when you're outside, if the wind is blowing, when you're shooting, you can still get the kind of lift from the dresses that you got?
We did do a day of tests, of camera tests. It was before we shot The Dance at the Gym, and it was important for Steven to focus on the petticoats. He wanted that to be an element of movement, within the number. I was choosing and engineering the dresses to move in specific ways, appropriate to the 1950s, but then also that they held together and you were able to see their legs, and that it would move and spin out and open up, and I worked, and because of my experience doing costumes for a lot of musicals, I know what certain fabrics do. as they move, and what will give you lift, and what, the kind of weight that you want, so that you get a certain snap, or or it floats, or So I made those decisions, and then we brought them to the studio and tried it out, and it was amazing. He was using it was a new camera technique that was slowing the image down, so that you actually saw this undulating petticoat and skirt, obviously, just move in space. It was amazing. I mean, you could have it as a screensaver or something like that.
I mean,
Screensaver.
was there? Yeah, I mean, it must have been gratifying for you though to see like working with these guys that have been. I guess you're used to that with people like Lin Manuel Miranda and that team, but to have a cinematographer and a director that are so in sync in an almost magical way.
In sync and seasoned, and with that body of experience, it's just I feel so very fortunate, and I run out of words, to express just how fortunate I feel. I think I learned so much being on set with both of them, and also the confidence and calm that was the set time, when we were shooting. And I think that there was great trust, there was great respect, and also from the cast there was such amazing joy. I mean, everybody was excited. And so much youth, and there were 50 of the young actors. I actually didn't have a number to put it to, but that I knew that there were a lot of the actors had never been on film. So I think that it was a new experience for them. Understandably, I mean, many of them had come from theater, and are amazing, dancers and athletes, really. But all of that energy coming together with people who really, know what they're doing and have the chops to pull this off, and recreate or retell a story in a new way, really, is just life changing.
Is there a fundamental difference between designing for the stage and designing for film, or is it pretty similar?
For me, it's similar in the original approach, in what my intent is, which is to tell the story in the best way, and to make true and realize the emotional arc of each of the characters. To understand what the intent of the character is and how they fit into this world. Creating worlds, whether it's on film or in theater, is what I do. It's and being in control of that, setting up rules for that world that I then follow. And I find both hugely gratifying. I think that where it starts to veer off into two different directions is with theater. You have the opportunity to see, it's like paintings or slides that you see from scene to scene. You can study them over a period of time and then you have a finished product in the end. That would be our tech and preview period, and then we open, and then it's set. But that might last 3 months, let's say. For film, that slide, that moment where everything comes together, all the clothing is there, it's going to be set that day, that moment, in that hour when it first arrives,
Right.
on set. And so it better be what you want for it to be. You need to have done enough work, enough homework, really understand what you're putting up there before it arrives, because the scene is shot, and then the end of that day happens, and you go on to the next scene. or you stay in those same clothes for for day after day after day. It just depends.
One of the things I thought was, and I don't know much about fashion myself. I'm a t-shirt and hoodie kind of guy, but the dresses in this film were spectacular. I mean, the colors, the patterns on these dresses. And I'm curious, I mean, even some of the did you concentrate being that were the dresses, especially on the side of the Sharks side, the ladies on the Sharks team, there was a lot of, it felt like tropical colors or more like yellows, and was that an intentional thing?
Absolutely intentional. Yeah, I mean, it was,
It was just striking and gorgeous.
Yeah, some of what I was saying earlier is, thank you for saying that. I was hoping to give the Sharks, I mean, allow the Sharks to embrace the culture that they had come from, and to be relaying that within the story. So, I reserved flower prints and, kind of tropical, it's still, albeit 1950s prints.
Sure.
But that they were definitely reflective of, their home, or where they came from.
It really came through. I mean, I thought that was something that even when I was watching, I'm like, wow, that really accentuated. It was something I wasn't expecting, but I noticed.
Yeah, and then on the opposite side, or on, for the Jets, I was holding on to the geometric, and so if you look at how I dealt with pattern with the Jets, there was less pattern. It was, less prevalent, but when it had it was a little more geometric, push, so that it was connected to the city, really.
Yeah, and it all that came through. And also the more of like, Maria's pure as the driven snow. So you have to start with that, which was great. Now I got to ask about Anita.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in love with Rita Moreno. Rita Moreno in the original West Side Story is one of the sexiest characters I think ever to appear on cinema history.
Yeah.
Well, our new Anita is right up there. and I mean, my God, were her dresses and her outfits spectacular.
Thank you.
Did you feel because you actually had Rita Moreno as part of the cast, was she ever looking over your shoulder like, you better make this character look good?
I put that on myself. I didn't need Rita to to be leaning over me. I
mean, Ariana DeBose, is it DeBose?
Mm-hmm.
She was incredible.
Yeah. And I actually, I knew Ariana before we did West Side Story, because I dressed her when she was in the ensemble of Hamilton. That was where we met, actually. And then I dressed her in Summer, the Donna Summer musical. And, so I knew.
So you already felt love for her.
That she is. I had already experienced that. And I was also, that purple dress, and everybody talks about the purple dress that Anita wore, in the '61 West Side Story. That is one that will always be in my heart, in my soul. It is an Irene Sheriff design that it is so difficult to, you can't be beat, really, and I needed to. I mean, you talk about thinking about stories that have already been told and design that's already been done for a film, and I had to set that to the side in order to be able to design what I was going to design for Ariana, for our Anita, and also know and acknowledge that our audiences know that purple dress. They know Rita Moreno in that purple dress. Whatever I design has to at least give the same energy, vibe, fill that same moment for our modern audiences. With Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. Thankfully, the scene that purple dress was designed for was an evening scene, which was the dance at the gym, and they go on to do America in the '61 West Side Story. For our West Side Story, it's a different day. It's a day
Yep.
dress. I could choose a color that would take presence and focus within the streets of New York, and the metaphor was different. For me, secretly, my metaphor was that she was the sun, and then you've got the rest of the community circulating around her, and surrounding her, and lifting them up as a couple. I feel like, I hope that it does fill that moment for our production or our film in the way that the original does.
One of the things I also liked, which was sort of different, I guess call it an update, was the character of Anybody's. I thought Anybody's in the original, it's like, is she a tomboy? But I think with this new character leaning into the idea that this character is trans or non-binary. And I thought that was a great choice. And that performance was great. I wanted more of that character, and some spectacular stuff. Was that something also that was sort of a conscious updating? Was that something that Spielberg said, look?
Absolutely. I mean, that was what Tony Kushner brought to the new.
It was a great choice.
Screenplay. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it, I believe that, there was maybe 5% of the original screenplay that I think that is it Arthur Lawrence that wrote the screenplay as well. But for the '61 film, it was adapted, changed. Tony Kushner, probably took about 95% of it and made it his own. It has more modern language. It deals with more kind of issues of today. I think as far as the Latinx community and how they're seen, and also transgender characters and how they're seen as well. And I think that's directly reflective of Anybody's and how that story is told. I mean, most specifically, when you see Officer Krupke, that scene, it comes out full on. You're just like, oh, okay, got it. And beautifully done. It's very, very beautifully done, I think.
And that the Officer Krupke scene was great. I mean, again, a new reimagining, something that was unique to the new version, I think, in terms of its staging and the way it was done. I love that. I thought it was fantastic. Now, we haven't talked about, Tony or Ansel Elgort, and I really enjoyed his costumes as well. I mean, he's a pretty tall dude, isn't he?
Yeah, he's very tall.
He's very...
I think he might be 6'4", 6'5", something. I mean, he's tall, and then you put him alongside of Rachel.
Yeah, I was going to say
Maria.
Did their height difference pose a problem in terms of design?
I don't know that it was so much for design. We did have platform shoes that we gave to Rachel, so that if they were walking together, they weren't out. Like Rachel wasn't out of the camera, or either way. I think that at some point we'll let it go. We just embrace the fact that they were of different heights.
Right.
But Steven was very judicious how he staged it so that they were always both the same, visibly connected.
Were there specific designers from the period that you used as a basis for what you wanted to dress either one of them in, since they were front and center? Not that they would have the money at the time to buy, I don't know what to...
I don't know that. I mean, I was looking at people. I was less considering. And I love all of the designers that were designing, in the 1950s. It created such style for America and for the world. But it wasn't going to serve me to dip into designer, like couture design, because this community would never they would never be able to afford it. That just wouldn't be their go-to. They might, I would say, like say with Anita, I was imagining, because she's a seamstress, that she's looking at celebrity magazines and looking at celebrities that were popular at the time, and she might try to recreate something that she had seen, give it her own spin. So her dance at the gym dress is based on a dress that I've found, or a photograph that I found of Elizabeth Taylor, and the top is directly hers. I changed the color of what that dress was.
That is, I love that you did that. That is so cool.
But it's, I think that it's those touches that give a design reality. I mean, you make sense of how do human beings create themselves stylistically? How do they dress themselves? What goes into how they make those choices? I think that they were looking at films of the period, and like Tony, is definitely a James Dean kind of character, and also Marlon Brando kind of character. So sure. If he goes to the movies, he's seeing those actors, and then he might choose a piece of clothing that was reflective of them. That looks cool on that. That's the way that we do. We dress ourselves today.
Right.
We're looking at celebrities and we say, "Oh, that looks cool on X. I should put that on. Maybe I would look as cool as that."
But I think that even if people don't necessarily know that you were looking at an Elizabeth Taylor dress, it's your philosophy that comes through in the finished product. Like, you don't have to know. I just love that you bring that that you would even go in and look into those things. I mean, that's what gives, it's hard to explain to people that it's a culmination of all of those choices that all of the people that are designing what you're seeing on screen, it creates my favorite word, verisimilitude. It creates a believability, and that can't really be taught. It's more of an instinctual thing that you're doing. And I think that comes from, would you say that comes from the fact that you have such a formal background and training in all of this, and knowing how it allows you to sort of make these choices that other people might not?
Absolutely. I mean, it goes back to what we were saying about, I was talking about taking on and living vicariously through these different characters. And my joy and passion is being able to tap into and tell the story of this specific character, get into the head of the character and actually open it up and let it blossom, show, unpeel the onion and show what's inside and what motivates them to do X, Y, and Z. But I get to do that with every character within the story that's being told over the film or over the production, and that's really exciting for me. It's much more expansive.
Did you have a favorite character in the film?
Anita will always be, and for those very reasons that we were talking about, that character and those designs will always be close to my heart because I spent so much time with them. Because right. I was not fighting, but that I was conscious of what was at stake in a way. But then I love Bernardo's clothes. I love, it's completely different from the original film, definitely. I've seen a few photographs of the original Broadway show, but it just has a different vibe, and I think that David brings this great strength and machismo to the role that I hope that, and also, just giving it that fashion sensibility, the fact that he is a boxer within this story that we're telling.
I really like that.
And, how he might be modeling himself, who he's looking to. And I'm always looking for clues as to, how can I best represent who this character is? And, looking at Mike Feist and how he played Riff, and what's his point of view? Like where is he in his life? And I think there was a simplicity in the pieces, not in the choice, but there was a simplicity that allowed for his performance to really spring forward.
He was another, I thought, a great updating of that character. I mean, he was much more fierce and dangerous in this version of the film, and angry in a way, and rightfully so. And I really enjoyed the Tony Riff relationship, because you felt something was really at stake all the time between them. I mean, his like, you've got to come back, and Tony didn't seem like, nah, but he's like, Riff seemed a lot more, I wouldn't call it desperate, but yearning, and like you really felt the tension between them more in this. It was less fairy tale like it was in the 61 version. And I really like that about this version.
Absolutely. I mean, he also, there are a couple of touches one that Mike asked for, which was a necklace that he wore as a bracelet. And he said that, I'd like something that would be like my mother's necklace, that, assuming that his mother has passed, or she's, like really fallen off, and, he's from a broken home. So, he has certain items, also the medal that he has, that he wears as well. It's a saint's medal. That was taken from, the idea was taken from a photograph by Bruce Davidson, which was, he embedded himself with gangs in and around New York in the 1950s. So there's a lot of photographs of that as well, and the different gang members. So I'm always looking for, just thinking about Officer Krupke in that number, and thinking the different characters that make up a gang, and how as you have different characters within a family, and this is the family that they've created. So the challenge for me is to make those characters as specific and as clear, rendered as clearly as possible for the audience.
I have to ask about Rita Moreno's character, Valentina, who was a new character for this version. And she's kind of like Switzerland in a way. Like, her store is, she knows everybody. She's been there. She knows everyone in the neighborhood. She knows whatever candies they buy or whatever candies they steal. She knows everything. Now, she's almost like, in a way, she's the saintly character. It's almost, she's the church. How did you approach that character, since there wasn't any previous version of that character?
Valentina is the character that has, as you're saying, has seen it all. She's been through the heartache and the fear, and just feeling vulnerable to New York as it was, when she married her husband, who was a white man. And so she completely understands what the struggle is potentially going to be for Tony and Maria. That's why she is really in a position of warning, and wanting for Tony to stay on the right track, and to make his life as easy as possible, because it's a struggle enough to be successful. So what I was doing color-wise, I dip into that, just because with the two lovers, with Maria and Tony, they're coming from their given communities. They're coming, Maria is coming first with the white dress and the red belt, and then go, for their first date, going into the red sweater. I made those choices, one, because I felt like she is a woman that is working to be mature. So she's going to dress in a way that is showing off her body, that looks, it's a silhouette that's more mature with that pencil skirt. And still she brings with her culture. With Tony, he's coming in, with neutrals, and then with that blue tone. For Valentina lives somewhere in between. I mean, her clothes kind of encompass both. I think that she, as you were saying, like with Switzerland, she, it's not like she is neither. She's actually kind of integrated in a way, which makes her shop a safe space for everyone. As it turns out, not for everyone, but yes, for everyone.
Well, listen, I could keep you for hours. It's been fascinating to talk with you. I think to wrap this up, I think your work on West Side Story was just absolutely stunning. And the career you've had over the last 30 years has really been amazing. And I think you've had a lot to do with bringing musical theater as a form, as an art form, kept it contemporary, keeping, which is always important. And so it's been incredible. Now, I would ask you, you talked a lot about your formal education. What would you tell people that are inspired by your work and want to do what you do? What are some of the bits of advice you might give to them? Where should they start?
And all designers, as you've talked to so many, we come at it from different places, from different backgrounds. I would say, for any creative, open yourself up to experience, open your eyes up to visuals, drink it all in. It's all useful. Take hold of experiences that will flood you with visual imagery, because it will always be useful, whether that's in a formal college or graduate study, or it's interning and apprenticing. This work, whether it's film or it's theater, it's not for the lighthearted, or well, it is for the lighthearted, but it's not for those that don't want to put in the time and energy. It's a lot of hours, and a lot of soul searching, figuring out how to best do what you do and how to make it a reflection of who you are as a creative. I think that if it's the perfect position if you love working with other people, and that is both in developing how the story is told, and it is working with other talented and creative people, making the costumes, getting them on the actors and performers, and creating a world.
Do you think you'll ever direct?
I would love to have the opportunity to direct. I mean, because storytelling is in me. I just haven't had the opportunity yet. So
you sound the way you speak, I could see you directing. Yeah, I would go to that show.
Okay, come on.
Now, what do you have coming up next? Anything you can talk about? Anything you're working on now?
I'm doing it's opening soon. MJ the musical on Broadway, which is about Michael Jackson.
I was listening to a story about that on NPR with one of the writers. Yesterday, I think.
Lin Manuel wrote the book.
Yeah, she was being interviewed.
Yeah, and then it's all of Michael Jackson's actual music.
Well, that's got to be a fun show to work on.
Yeah, it was really exciting. I mean, and I think that it's a different way of relaying his story in a way that's respectful, and also his music is just amazing. Revisiting all that music is really wonderful.
Yeah. Does it go all the way back to the early Jackson 5 days, or does it
flashes back to all those? Yeah, those songs that I was listening to, me and my three brothers listened to growing up. Absolutely.
Can people follow you on social media at all? Are you on Instagram?
Absolutely, I am on Instagram. It's Paul TAZEWELL.
Well, Mr. Tazewell, I cannot thank you enough. This has been what a wonderful conversation, and it's been just a joy speaking with you. Your work is inspirational and it's incredible. And for those of you, if you haven't seen West Side Story, because I don't think enough people went and saw it, it will be coming out on home video and streaming soon, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. and you should listen to it on a big surround sound system if you can, because it's great. And I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Robert.
Paul, thanks very much. You know, I feel so privileged doing these shows. What a great guest Paul TAZEWELL was, and we thank him for being here. We also thank our sponsor, Western Costume Company, located in Los Angeles, a one-stop shop for costume designers, costumers, and stylists. Since the early days of Hollywood over a century ago, Western costume has been an industry mainstay. Whether you work in film, television, theater, commercials, or fashion, you'll find what you need in their vast warehouse. As an aside, I've been there. It's amazing. A special thanks to our producer and founder, Martika Ibarra, and of course, our co-founder, legendary costume designer, Marilyn Vance. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification button. And you can find the Designing Hollywood podcast wherever you get your podcasts, also on iTunes. Follow me, Robert Meyer Burnett, on Instagram, on Twitter at BurnettRM, or find me on my own YouTube channel, The Burnett Work. Thanks for watching. We very much appreciate it.